Good afternoon, everybody. So what I would like to do is I would like to take you a step back and kind of take a little bit more of a long-term of a global view and tell you a bit more about a theme that has really caught the imagination at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos this January, which is this notion that beyond this notion of Industry 4.0, we are really at the dawn of a fourth industrial revolution. So if we look at this as in a sort of a more long-term trend, right? So the first industrial revolution based around technologies such as the steam engine and spinning machines and railroads was followed by a second industrial revolution that was very much based around mass production, the onset of electricity. The third industrial revolution was very much about the beginning of advanced electronics, the introduction of the internet, and there is a sense that we are now at the dawn of a fourth industrial revolution. So beyond some of the technologies that you just mentioned, such as obviously 3D printing, big data analytics, the Internet of Things, we actually have a sense of what will shape this fourth industrial revolution is that a lot of these things are really happening at the same time in a very time-compressed manner, much faster than these previous revolutions. All these previous revolutions entailed some quite painful, in some cases, adjustment periods where really the global workforce needed to catch up with what had actually happened to them as these technologies played out. And there is a real sense, and certainly that was the feeling also that happened this January in Davos, that actually in this fourth industrial revolution, we will not have the benefit of a lot of time. So we'll need to rebuild the plane as we're flying it. So what we did on that is the World Economic Forum did a global study, which we called the Future of Jobs Survey, where we wanted to go beyond, some of this futuristic high-level talk of this, and we really wanted to understand this in some more detail. And to do that, we interviewed about 400 of the world's largest employers from all sectors, representing between them around 14 million employees. About a third of the global Fortune 500 actually responded to this survey. And what made our research a bit different from other research that had been done in the past is that we really asked them very much to base this on the concrete planning horizons of their HR departments, and there's their strategy officers for workforce strategy in the immediate future. So between now and 2020 to 2025. What did we find? So first of all, a lot of these things are really seen at the cold face of dealing with recruitment issues and so on, are really seen to already be impacting the skills requirements of a huge range of professions. Secondly, these things we're not just talking about the technologies, we're actually also talking about these technologies happening in a ever more complex geopolitical landscape, accompanied by radical social change, by demographic change, so such as aging societies, obviously, for example, in some European countries, but as well as a very young workforce and a very strong rising middle class in emerging markets. So all of these things are kind of playing out at the same time. And what our respondents told us was that really by 2020, a lot of these things would really have started to be concrete considerations in their future workforce planning. So interestingly, some of you obviously might have engaged or have an opinion on this debate, are the robots going to steal our jobs, right? So what we found is that actually this picture is very nuanced and very complex, and we will see a reformulation of the global labor market. So for example, we do find that things like 3D printing will have a kind of a negative effect on employment for example, in the frontline manufacturing roles. 3D printing would have a negative effect there. However, for example, it could be a huge job creator in engineering roles. And similarly, for example, robotics, at least in the short term and if well managed also in the longer term, has a huge job creation potential. Interestingly as well, some other factors that our respondents told us about spontaneously is that other factors that are not these technological factors that are so much on everybody's mind are also very much part of this picture. So for example, the increase in geopolitical volatility that we have been seeing, unfortunately, over the last couple of years are also very much perceived to affect this global jobs landscape. Furthermore, we found that at really the level of skills and concrete requirements for individual occupations, we see an accelerating rate of change of those. So between 2015 and 2020, about 35% of the core skills requirements of a huge range of professions in manufacturing, but in technology, but even in other more traditional sectors, in media, in just about any sector, will have changed quite dramatically. And so that really will take place across the world, across geographies, as well as across a wide range of industries. If you look at the slide, so interestingly, for example, one sector that told us that they have been less, so that where they expect less future disruption in that regard is, for example, the media and entertainment industry, which obviously, if you look at kind of all the things that have been happening with online media and newspapers, they have already kind of borne the brunt of some of this change and of this adaptation taking place. Other industries, including so the mobility, automotive industry, basics and infrastructure, and so on, are going to see a lot more of these rapidly changing skills requirements now, as things like the Internet of Things, wearables in the workplace, things like that are really going to become a part of kind of the day-to-day work experience across a huge range of professions. Unsurprisingly, because of that, so we also found, and we have been told by the respondents to this Future of Jobs survey, that there will be an increasing risk of skills gaps as people and retraining that people cannot keep up. And that is, again, that is basically across the board in a huge range of industries and professions. Looking at this, what does this mean in terms of skills? What are the skills that will be required? And so while obviously there's very much a debate here on sort of the need for additional vocational training, STEM education, hard skills, all that is true. However, at the same time, as technology is automating away many of the routine aspects of these jobs, there will actually be quite a shift in kind of what your day-to-day would look like. For example, in a manufacturing or in an installation frontline job, for example, a lot of the more repetitive aspects of your job would probably give rise to things that require a lot more creativity, a lot more mastery at the basic level of more basic skills, and so on. So this slide that is up there currently, that is the level of individual skills, and has basically been aggregated up across a huge range of skills that people have been telling us about. And so that is what you see in this next slide here. So what we're seeing here is that the blue part of these bars, the middle part, so that is actually what our respondents expect to remain constant across in terms of core skills requirements of occupations in industries. The light blue part to the left is newly required skills that were not previously considered essential to these job functions, and the gray part on the right are skills requirements that will be not important in the future. So what we see here is that, so basically it is not that one category of skills will become particularly more important. So for example, it is not that we suddenly all need a lot more technology and hard skills, or that we all suddenly need necessarily to have huge social skills, but just within these broad categories, actually what that means at the very nuanced level will still change a lot. So within each of those categories, we will have a really rapidly changing skills landscape. So what do we do about that? And here, so what again, our respondents across the world from this very wide and representative sample of a huge range of industries and countries was telling us, to a striking extent, there is a realization that what we will need to do is to invest in reskilling of current employees for the long term. So this is not something that can be taken lightly anymore. It is not something that we can take for granted, that people will enter the workplace with the skills that they need to keep thriving in those jobs. there will be definitely a need for business in partnership with others to take on a bigger role in constant reskilling and continuous learning of their workforces, as we have been told by our respondents. Some of the other strategies that are really perceived to hold a part of the key to successfully managing this change are support to mobility and job rotation, a much deeper than in the past collaboration with educational institutions, as well as targeting untapped talent pools. So, for example, there is definitely an opportunity to increase female representation across a huge range of skills and across a huge range of occupations, and as a lot of this technology will really change as well the day-to-day shape and requirements of these jobs, we will see that diversity will become really an asset across a much wider range of occupations than in the past, because we will simply do not know what tomorrow's jobs will look like, what skills will be required very concretely. So therefore, diversity in our workforces also breeds resilience. We have a few additional thoughts on what can make us successful. So, for one thing, we believe at the World Economic Forum that there is a need to reinvent human resources functions, to be much more strategic and aligned with the core mission of the company than in the past. One way to make that happen and to really ingrain that in the culture of companies is also by making much smarter use of some of these opportunities presented by, for example, new data analytics, to understand, for example, how much time people spend on their day-to-day jobs on what kind of tasks, to understand in a much more fine-grained way what is it that makes people successful at their jobs, what is it that causes slack on jobs, and so on. So there's some really exciting opportunities here with regard to these new data analytics. Thirdly, and I've heard just before my presentation, the room was talking about this. So we do believe indeed that education systems need to be reinvented for the long term. And we believe that more than framing this as a debate around things like vocational education or university training, we need to have a system where we have much less front-loading of education early in people's lives, and we need to have much more of a sense of continuous lifelong learning by default for everyone. And to do that, we require also incentives and support, as well as collaboration between the public sector, the private sector, education institutions, and yes, in a wide range of countries. So these are some of the suggestions we have on making this happen to successfully master the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you.